Hello there Pixel Pushers, Sadiq Hussain here with another Affinity Photo tutorial this winter's afternoon. This is a panorama, as you can see, from summer this year in fact, in Barmouth in West Wales in the UK, and I thought I'd do a demonstration incorporating 3 or 4 of the tools that we've covered in the tools series of videos. So that's the gradient tool, that's the burn tool, and of course the panoramic automated option within Affinity Photo as well. Now, we have done a panorama before, but there's in fact lots of ways we can learn how to apply many of the tools, and also a graduated filter at the top there to darken the sky. So there's a number of areas that we can look at for this one particular project. So this is what we're going to end up with. So if I roll back on the history and take it all the way back, and that's the stitched panorama in the first place. So we're going to take it even further back and start afresh. So let me just close that. Okay, we don't want to save that. So first of all, in Affinity Photo, you just go to File, New Panorama. Of course, you need to know where you've got your images that you've taken originally with regards to a panoramic stitch in the first place. So we click on Add in this dialog box, and okay, so I know where they are. They're in the Barmouth folder, and it's these 4 here. So clearly you'd need to make sure you know where the images are, whether it's 2, 3, 4, 5, and normally 4 or 5 is what you'd have. And it simply selects those images, and if you've taken them in sequence, it'll stitch them automatically without any problems. So all we do is click on Stitch Panorama. If you realize at this stage that each of these images, there's any one of them that you don't want, you can remove them or add further ones if you selected the wrong ones. But we've selected the 4 that we want, and we just click on Stitch Panorama. This part of it is very straightforward, and then we just click OK. It brings that into the Affinity Photo persona of the software, and it's ready to. Now, at this stage you've got some tools here. Of course, you can move things about, you can zoom in, you can crop, but I wouldn't do any of that here. What I would in fact do is click Apply on the top left to apply the panoramic stitch. Once it's done that, you can do a number of things at this stage. You can either crop it, which traditionally most people would do, use the crop tool and crop that so you don't have the blank canvas around, the blank area rather, not even a canvas, but with no pixels there. But in fact, it's far better to fill in these pixels with like-minded pixel samples from the edge of the frame. And it's so easy to do in Affinity, it's well worth repeating several times. So I'll do this again. So it's essentially, we go to Select, because we're doing a selection of the alpha pixels, the non where there's no pixels at all, and go down to alpha range, down to the alpha range. And in the alpha range, we want to select partially transparent. If we select fully transparent, it will only select the pixels that don't exist at all. But of course, there might be some right near the edge which are partially transparent. So it's always better to say partially transparent, so it selects everything in that gap. Now what we want to make sure is that the selection line isn't right to the edge of the image. It's actually a couple of pixels into the image. So what we do is go back to Select, Grow and Shrink. So we want to grow or shrink the selection, and essentially we want to grow the selection by 2 pixels. If we put in -2, it shrinks it. If we put in 2 and just press the enter button a couple of times, or click the apply, and you can see that it's come down 2 whole squares or 2 pixels into the image. You won't notice that once you actually zoom out. It's only when you zoom right in. Now that we've got the right selection, and it's we've overlapped it with the image ever so slightly by 2 pixels. We go to edit in the menu and we just say in paint. And as you know, the in paint tool allows the software to sample the edges of an image or wherever you denote, and then uses that information to paint in the areas where we're missing pixels, whether that's when you're repairing a photograph or when you're adding extra pixels like here. And there we go. It takes a few seconds to do that, because if you remember, this is 4 or 5 images, high resolution images stitched together, so it's a big file now. You can see it's a 42 megabyte file. It's only a raw image, but nevertheless it's a 42 megabyte file, and you're adding millions and millions of pixels around the edges. So, you know, it depends on the speed of your computer. Now that we've done that, we just do deselect it. So deselect, and that's done. Okay, the stitch. What I would recommend that you do, I would go around the edge where it's been stitched and make sure you can see there, that's where it's sampled that area of the mountain range, and it's just placed in. It isn't quite right there. It won't make any difference to where the grass is, because of course you can see there it's stitched together. That isn't quite right, and we can fine-tune that, but in fact for this photograph we don't need to, and I'll tell you for why. Is that we're going to be adding a border, and we're going to be correcting for the lens used, and all of that will help to disguise this edge. But we've put those pixels in so that the border that we add and the lens distortion that we correct for, it doesn't eat into more of the image if we'd done a crop on it. Okay, so we can see there it's actually replicated that person there twice. And yes, you could go in and clone it out, but there's actually no need in this case. I'll show you exactly what I mean now. Okay, so we've done that, and the next stage would be we want to edit that a little bit. And in fact, I want that horizon to be a little bit higher. I want it to follow more of the rule of thirds, or in fact the rule of fifths, if you like. I want to crop that a little bit. So essentially what I want to do is I want less sky, because it's a little bit bland and boring at the top, plus it pushes the horizon further up, and that's what I'm looking for. Okay, and then click apply. Remember, when you do a crop in Affinity Photo, you think it's cropped, but in fact that information at the top is still there. So what you need to do is to right click on the layer and rasterize and trim, and that makes sure that that information is gone, because when we put in a border, when we do anything to the edges, it gets confusing if that information is still there at the top. Okay, so we've cropped it, we've stitched it, and what we now need to do is essentially edit that photograph so it looks better. And we can do it obviously in a number of ways. We can put on an adjustment layer, but what I'm going to do is duplicate that layer, change the blend mode to either overlay or soft light. Okay, overlay works quite well, so we'll do soft light though. Okay, so if we just see a before and after, that's very washed out and bland, and that's got a little bit more punch to it. We're going to add a bit more punch to it as well, so I'm happy with that. And then in addition to that, what we want to do is to apply a gradient near the top. Okay, and one of the ways to do that, of course, we're going to use the gradient tool, but the gradient tool will kick in automatically if we apply a layer and a fill layer, or a live adjustment layer, a new adjustment layer, and we put in curves or shadows and highlights. Let's put in a curves adjustment. Okay, you can see there it's already put in a curves adjustment with, of course, with a mask ready for us to edit. And we adjust this, and what we're adjusting for is the sky. It's the sky I want to make a bit stronger, and we can stop the effect in the ground. Okay, so we can do that. Okay, so now that we've done that, we click on the gradient tool. Okay, and as soon as we click on the gradient tool, we can put in a gradient. Remember, black blocks, white reveals. Okay, so we can see where we want that gradient to apply. So I don't want it to apply down in the ground, so I can bring that up here. So really what we're saying is that curves adjustment now only applies, or applies more to the sky than it does to the foreground, and I can move that slide. You can probably just see a subtle change in that. Okay, and that's all I'm interested in. It's the principle of it, that you can apply a gradient on top of an adjustment, whether that adjustment is for shadows and highlights or color or hue or whatever it is. In this case, it's level, it's curves, which is all about contrast. Okay, so I'm happy with that. Okay, and if we now apply, if we wanted to apply put in a text in the top left. So we've already used the stitching tool with panoramic tool. We've used the crop tool, which is a key tool, of course. We've used the gradient tool. We've used a new layer option in the menu. And but before I put on some text, what I want to do is to just right click on that top layer, and we've got two options here, merge down and merge visible. If we click on merge visible, it merges all the visible layers, combines them, and creates a new fresh layer combined of all the others. That gives us those to go back to should we need to make any adjustments. If I'd have used the other option, it would have merged everything together and only given us this and not have these. So I can still at this stage demonstrate what differences we've made, but really these don't matter now because we've made a new a composite of the whole image as a layer right at the top. Okay, so in here now, if I want to put in some text, again to the text tool, make sure we want the artistic text tool, choose the font that you want, and we go for a nice italic font. We can adjust the size and positioning a bit later on, but if I just type in there the title of it, okay, and if we just change the color of it, change the color of it, just make sure it's selected, change the color of it, maybe a nice light gray would be good. Okay, and we can obviously position it where we want to. Remember, we're going to put a border there, so we don't want it too close to the edge. So we could perhaps put it there. And in that text, if we actually want to add a little drop shadow, go to the effects and go down to outer shadow. And just pull that out, and we'll have it black, increase the radius, offset it a little bit, and you might not be able to see it, so let's just zoom in a little bit. You can see how that shadow is offset a little bit. Don't perhaps want it too much, and that's okay. I'm happy with that. Just adds a little bit of interest to the text. Okay, position that in the center again with Control and 0 or Command and 0 on a Mac and on your keyboard, and that's, I'm happy with that. And of course, finally, what we want to do is to add a border to it. Now you can apply still further effects on that as an adjustment layer if you want to, but let's just add a border now. So we make sure that we've got that layer selected, because that's where the border is going to go, not on the text but on the actual image itself. So again, we go to effects, and we go to outline. There, we've done this before. I'll put a link in the description to the other videos where we explore the borders and the different types of borders. We want the border on the inside, and do we want it to be black in color? Probably not. Want it to be visible, so we'll make it white. Now we can see it, and how big do we want it? Do we want it quite big, or do we want it a little bit fairly subtle? I think fairly subtle, maybe good. And that's that done. Go back to the layers palette and click on the text again and just position it where you want to exactly, and resize it obviously if you want to. And once you're happy with that, that's that done. So that exercise, very quickly, we've gone through stitching an image together using the panoramic tool, which is very, very easy. We've made some adjustments to it. We filled in the edges to make sure we had a larger canvas. And oh yeah, what we didn't do, sorry, is just to fix the lens distortion that you might get. And of course, you do that in the develop persona. And so once you're in the develop persona, you go to the lens correction, and which one do we want? And I know which lens I had on the camera, Samyang 14mm. So if we just go back to, just to show you what it looks like with the lens corrected, without it, and because we've got that one layer selected, it will only affect that part. And I think actually with the lens correction, it means that we hide some of those defects around the edges, and I'm happy to actually apply that. Then just click develop, and we're done. And clearly you just want to save it. You might want to increase the contrast a bit more. It's a little bit sort of bland here, but of course you can do all of that in the adjustment layers. You could apply a contrast adjustment layer or a curves adjustment layer there. We've gone through that before. And then finally you just go to file and export. And if you're exporting it as a JPEG, select the appropriate. This will be a large file because it's many images stitched together. It's just told you here it's 32 megabytes. But if that's too large, just bring down the quality of the JPEG just by a few percent, and suddenly it goes from 32 megabytes to less than 10 megabytes. So you could compromise and say, oh, we'll have it at 95% quality, because you're not going to notice that even if you print it out, and that's a manageable 13 megabyte file. But of course you might want it as a TIFF, which will be a much larger file in its entirety. And then just click export, and there you've got that image. Okay, so I think I will in fact export that, give it a title. Okay, I think we're done there. Okay, Barmouth Beach Panorama Summer 2021. Okay, that's done. We don't want it in thumbnails. We can put it on the desktop for now. Okay, so that's exported and saved. Thank you very much for watching. Any thoughts, comments, suggestions, I'd gladly welcome them here at Pixel Pushers. I do appreciate all the views and all the comments and feedback I'm getting. It's really gratifying, makes it worthwhile doing these tutorials, and we're all learning together moving forward. I'm pleased with all the subscribers I've had. It's exceeded my expectations. It's early days, but obviously onwards and upwards. I really would like to increase those. So if you are watching these videos but you haven't yet subscribed, and I know there's many hundreds of you because I can see that from the number of views, please do consider subscribing. It costs nothing, but of course it really helps out the channel. It helps out how much it's noticed, how many other people come across it, and of course give it credence. And so any comments, any feedback, likes and subscriptions would be gratefully received here at Pixel Pushers. Thank you very much, and give it a go.